Retail sales in Europe are led by a handful of big spending countries. We're talking about Germany, France, UK, Spain, Italy. But as we all know, there are many more countries in Europe than just that short list. And also, as we all know, every shopper is unique. So, what I want to know is what retail trends are we seeing across the European region? And are there common themes that we can find across retail in Europe? To find out, we're going to talk with Chard Martinus, head of EMEA retail research. And all of that is right now on everything we know about retail. Yes, this is the show where we tell you everything we know about retail and real estate. We broadcast live on LinkedIn. We're also live on YouTube, but of course, you don't have time to watch us live, so you can watch the instant replay whenever you want. All of our shows are archived on the web at everythingweknow.show. So, my name is James Cook. I research retail and real estate for JLL, and I'm based out of the USA. Let's visit with our guest right now, Chard. You're joining us from the Netherlands.
Hi, James. Thank you for having me. And I'm indeed based in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam.
Excellent. Now, that's where you live, but your work takes you all over the region. So we're going to kind of dig into, I really want to find out from you we're going to get some big picture on retail and retail real estate trends, and then maybe zoom in and talk about a little bit, some maybe compare, contrast some local markets. So let's get into it. Big picture. How would you describe sort of the current state of retail real estate in Europe? I know that's a big question, but we'll start big.
It is a big question. And with retail, often there's a lot more nuance to the picture. But the first words that come to mind would be about the rebound coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic, resilience, but also accelerated change that we're seeing across the retail landscape. A couple of sort of overarching themes that are really influencing retail spending and consumer trends at the moment, of course, is high inflation, interest rates, that of course is curtailing some of the consumer spending power, and of course also sort of forcing consumers to be more selective in their purchases. And of course, if we also look at various groups of countries, we can see two quite different trends. One of them is about the fact that sort of the manufacturing sector sort of slowed down due to global slowed down demand globally, and that's also having an impact on some of the bigger economies. Think about Germany, that has a very large sort of manufacturing sector, but also the Czech Republic, for example. And at the same time, we can also see that the services industry is doing really, really well, with a lot of people going out again after the COVID-19 pandemic. We have seen tourism recover too, and even reached record high levels in terms of overnight spending for the first 7 months of the year across Europe. And what has really sort of also been adding to this sort of upward trend is the fact that we've welcomed a lot of also American tourists to Europe, to some of them also taking advantage of the fact that the euro sort of lost a bit of its value against the dollar. But ultimately, the European retail market has also benefited from a large influx of American tourists coming into Europe. And what we have seen is really a multi-speed growth and development across Europe, with some of the Southern European markets having performed remarkably well. Think about Spain, think about Portugal, but also Italy, and some markets where we have seen slower growth. What's also been sort of very encouraging for Europe is the fact that we have seen a strong recovery in consumer confidence in the period from October last year, when inflation was running at 10.6% in the Eurozone. It's now sort of reached 2.9% according to the latest figures. But during this period, all the way up to August, we have seen consumer confidence improve. And this is also very much driven by the fact that labor markets have been pretty much resilient across Europe. And this has also allowed a lot of consumers still to go out, still to keep spending, And this also helped to avoid, sort of a sharper slowdown in the market. So a lot of different trends that are coming together, and you really need to sort of delve in a bit deeper to understand what the implications are for physical retail. If you look at retailers, their financial performance, again, sort of it's a mixed picture, but we have seen various luxury retailers performing phenomenally well. We have seen various retailers operating on the value end of the market performing particularly well due to increased demand. And it's perhaps more in the middle segment where we have seen a bit of a bigger mixture in terms of financial performance, where some consumers opted to sort of go to more value-orientated retailers. Others have had to sort of increase the cost, but have not been able to also make sufficient profits. And that sort of really sort of creates a quite diverse picture across Europe. But it's very encouraging to see that also various retailers are adapting to this. They are adjusting. Some of them are expanding into new markets. Others are trying to tailor their store portfolios to make sure that they improve profitability. And other retailers are introducing new services. Think about repair services, which some retailers have introduced, like MediaMarkt on the electronic side, but also various fashion retailers. And this is also one way to at least help to boost revenue and grow revenue without necessarily taking on additional inventory on your balance sheet. And this is sort of quite an efficient way. And I think this is very encouraging to see that particularly the stronger retailers are able to navigate and adjust this challenging environment. But if we then start to look at sort of what retail places have benefited the most from this, they are really sort of the dominant high street areas across Europe, also the dominant shopping centers and the better located retail parks, where we have seen footfall levels sort of recover close to or even above pre-pandemic levels, which is very encouraging to see. Also the fact that tourism recovered, that has also helped to sort of see this recovery in sort of footfall. Of course, there are some weaker retail locations that are lagging in the recovery, but if you really sort of look at sort of the dominant areas, this is where we have seen a lot of activity also from retailers looking to secure space, tourist corridors that sort of stood out. And I think also we have seen, if we look at Paris, where we've just had the Rugby Cup, and also sort of where they are preparing for the Paris Games in 2024, we can also see that's also drawing in additional attention from retailers looking to benefit from the fact that it's sort of attracting additional visitors to the cities. So it is there are some areas where we have seen leasing activity pretty much sort of on par with what we've seen last year, or even above sort of last year levels. And I think what is also interesting is that we are also starting to see various retailers also start to sort of expand and trying to sort of find new locations, even outside sort of the prime areas. And I would say that's very encouraging as the market is starting to look for recovery early next year, maybe the end of this year already, but I think early next year would probably be more reasonable. And I think this is sort of where a bit more of this will filter through and will become a bit more visible across Europe.
And would you say just, and I know this is going to vary from region to regions, but I'm sure during, the pandemic, rents went down like this. Do you feel that overall retail asking rents have surpassed pre-COVID levels? Or, I mean, I'm sure they've recovered somewhat. Do you think they've fully recovered?
Well, this is where it is quite a mixed picture. I think if you look at it at an aggregated level, the prime high street rents and the shopping center rents, they fell around 14% from the peak to trough during the pandemic. And we have seen also the high street rents grow by 2% on average across Europe over the year. But if you start to look into it at city level, we can actually see that certain locations, think about Maximilianstrasse in Munich, which is really sort of a luxury hotspot, but also New Bond Street in London. This is where we have seen asking rents remained stable throughout the pandemic and even sort of more recently. But at the same time, we've also seen various locations where we had seen quite a sharp correction in the rents during the pandemic, where we have seen strong rental growth over the years. Think about sort of Rome, where we have seen 20% growth year on year in the high street locations. Think about Oslo. Think about Warsaw. All those locations have sort of reported 20% year on year growth. But also various other locations. Think about Spanish cities, Spain, Barcelona. They have seen a 2%, 3% growth year on year, and even London 5%. So it's we have seen various locations at least sort of seeing, sort of increased interest, sort of starting to push up the rental tone, the prime rental tone again. Of course, it will differ even at micro location. Of course, if you look at the market like London, where, of course, really the prime areas are moving ahead. Whereas if you look at the market like Barcelona and Madrid, this is where our colleagues have been talking about almost like a ripple effect in demand that has been spreading outside the prime high street locations, pushing it to some of the adjacent locations, and also benefiting increased demand. And it's various locations where we are seeing competitive tension amongst the major retailers looking to secure space. And interestingly, I've also sort of spoken with our colleagues in Switzerland, where sort of they spoke about the fact that sort of also in Zurich, Bahnhofstrasse, which is their prime high street location, and also one of the most expensive locations in Europe, they actually started talking about the fact that there are certain renovations and redevelopment projects are taking place next to sort of this high street in order to allocate some of the better and stronger quality brands there. So there are some pockets of positive developments in the retail market. And of course, I think once we enter a period of stronger growth, and hopefully that will sort of filtered through more from next year, I think we will see more pockets of rental growth emerge across Europe.
Can you give me a little bit more color on, so in areas where there is competition, where we're having expanding retailers, can you give me a little more color on what types of retail, what brands, who's expanding?
The retailers who are looking to secure space, that this is quite broad. But what is interesting is that we have seen various fashion retailers looking to secure space across Europe. And what was really interesting, that sort of part of this was the fact that because people were returning back to pre-pandemic lifestyles and coming out of COVID, we've seen various retailers really sort of focusing on pushing the formal wear, with people going back to the office again, or also going out again. And also the party wear is one of the types of clothes that has been sort of, that has seen increased demand, in addition to, of course, to athleisure, which is a sector that continues to grow all in all. Of course, luxury retailers, they have taken quite a significant amount of space, and they continue to look for opportunities, albeit sort of there's a bit of talk about sort of a bit of moderation after sort of the strong boom that we have seen. But I think there's still sort of opportunity there for them to continue to take space. Also on the value end of the market, we see various retailers that they very much believe that this is an opportunity for them to grow the store portfolios. There are sort of various consumers that are still sort of being impacted by sort of the high inflation and the increased cost of living. And of course, they need to be a bit more conscious with sort of their spending. So this is also an area where we see very strong growth. Cosmetics, again, sort of an area that's sort of where various retailers are looking to take space. Think about sort of German retailer Douglas. They are multi-channel brand, they're multi-sort of brand. They sell multiple brands, but they sort of said that sort of they now think this is a good time to grow again. And of course, we also continue to see demand from various EV retailers, electronic vehicle retailers, or at least manufacturers looking to selectively take space. So it's quite a mixture of brands that are looking to secure space at the moment.
Yeah, and it's interesting. A lot of that seems similar to what I'm seeing here in North America. Let's change topics. Also, in North America and really around the world, we've seen a real low amount of new construction and redevelopment, especially when it comes to, projects with a retail component. So not a lot of retail development probably going on in Europe right now. Are there notable projects that you're tracking right now in retail in Europe?
I mean, we have seen a couple of very interesting openings recently. I think one iconic development is been sort of Battersea Power Station in London. This was a former coal sort of station that has been redeveloped, and I think it's absolutely phenomenal. We've also seen in the Netherlands the opening of the Mall of the Netherlands, which was a redevelopment of sort of a shopping center near The Hague, which has now been sort of properly upgraded and expanded, and sort of it's been performing phenomenally well with that also sort of reported sort of continued rental growth basically since the reopening. So there are some examples where we can see that consumers are still very keen to go to due to the offering, due to the experience it offered. But if you look overall across Europe, we can definitely see that the development pipeline has sort of come down to a lower level. And what I think, what makes this very interesting at the moment is that if you look at the broader retail market, if you take into consideration that pretty much since the early 2000s, but really from 2008, we've gone through a period of structural change to also the growth of the online channel. Of course, we have seen various e-commerce operators who've been able to also benefit from the fact that we were in an environment of growth, low interest rates, and of course, sort of expansion was therefore also a bit more affordable, and various investors were also willing to support this. The fact that they they're very much focused on growth and not necessarily on profitability. And we are now in an environment whereby, of course, costs have gone up for staffing, for transportation, and also for interest rates. Borrowing costs for example, certain investments have gone up. And I think this is also having an impact on sort of the balance sheets for all types of retailers, but also for the e-commerce operators. And I think we're now sort of in entering a period whereby we're going to see a slight moderation in sort of the strong growth that we have seen from some of these e-commerce operators due to the fact that sort of the costs have gone up and they need to think about how do we sort of improve profitability. And I think the retailers that will benefit from this are sort of the retailers that are sort of have a strong proposition and are operating also in sort of with the bricks and mortar store portfolio and the omni-channel retail offer. These are the operators that in the next couple of years have an opportunity to to grow sort of revenue again. And if you then take into consideration that we also have a lower amount of construction taking place, we may actually see a lot more competition taking place for some of the best space across Europe. Maybe not as sort of phenomenally as sort of in the run up to 2007 and 2008, but at least I think there's going to be a much more positive story for physical retail in the next couple of years ahead of us. And that's partly the result of the fact that we're now seeing a low amount of construction, together with the fact that physical retail sales may now actually grow at higher rates than we have seen for a long, long time.
Yeah, you mentioned grow at higher interest rates, which has really, globally slowed down property investment. Let's talk about, European retail from a capital markets perspective. What, should we be looking for? What should investors be looking at? What activity is on the horizon from, property investment standpoint?
I would say at the moment, of course, sort of, I would say that sort of the investment market for retail has also sort of seen a slowdown in activity as a result of increased interest rates. But at the same time, what is very encouraging to see that sort of there's still a lot of liquidity in the parts of the retail market. Think about defensive products that retail parks, but also grocery real estate. But at the same time, where things will become more interesting once we start to see interest rates stabilize, and also perhaps where there's a bit more talk about sort of rates moving in and there's a bit more clarity on pricing, is perhaps also some of the dominant shopping centers. And I think once we see a handful of those transact, the market will also get a lot more clarity around sort of pricing for some of the sort of the good quality assets out there. There are the number of these assets currently on the market, and it will be very interesting to see whether they will whether they will trade over the next sort of 6 to 12 months as a whole.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to be watching for that. Okay. So coming soon is the big annual MAPIC conference. Can get that out of my mouth there. The MAPIC conference in France, where folks from all over the region come to talk and do business around retail real estate. So what are your expectations as folks are going to be gathering at that conference? What topics are they going to be talking about? What concerns do they have? You know, if you're a fly on the wall, what are you going to be hearing about at that conference?
I think if I sort of also look back at some of the conversations that I've had personally with retailers over the past sort of couple of months, what's very encouraging to see is that retailers are trying to look beyond the current period of uncertainty and slowdown, and very much thinking about, okay, we are keen to grow our portfolio again, store portfolio over the next 3 to 5 years. Where should we be present across Europe? And I think while sort of the current sentiment will perhaps also be reflected during the MAPIC conference, I ultimately think that sort of various retailers will be sort of trying to look beyond the current sort of slowdown and think about trying to understand where could be sort of strong opportunities for them to open up again across Europe, and where do we potentially some of the products that they offer could appeal to them as well. And I think that's sort of, I think, a very positive topic. And I think this is something that I expect to still happen during the MAPIC conference when we're there. From an investment point of view, I think, of course, there's a lot more sort of discussion around sort of what's happening in the investment market with the interest rates. And of course, ESG is sort of is the number one topic on the agenda. And there's also a topic that will be spoken about more broadly. But I think if you sort of look already sort of ahead, I think investors are also very keen to understand where they believe will be the strongest opportunities going forward. So I think there will be a lot more forward-looking at this MAPIC conference amongst various clients that are present there.
Let me ask you a hypothetical. So let's say there's a brand, an international brand that doesn't have any locations in Europe. Is there a typical region or city? I mean, are they always going to say, hey, I want my first location to be in, I don't know, Paris, London, Berlin? Or is it sometimes where, there's an unexpected location, that's the first market they try to break into?
Well, I think there are definitely a lot of international retailers. They would always have the key European cities on top of the list. And I think part of the reason why they are sort of always looking at some of the bigger cities, think about London, about Paris, there is, of course, market size, there is international appeal. It allows them to create brand exposure, and it's a way to accelerate growth. But at the same time, for not all retailers, this may always be possible. And this is where I think some of the brands start to look at perhaps the next tier of cities. Think about Amsterdam, think about Stockholm for expansion, and try to test whether some of the products could work there. But ultimately, a lot of the international retailers will sort of start with ultimately the top 20 cities across Europe, and most of them the top 7 across Europe. And I think if we sort of look forward, if you start to think about sort of expansion across Europe, then quite quickly you would think about sort of trying to sort of build up a more sort of broader coverage across Europe.
That makes sense. Yeah, absolutely. So, Chard, you spend all of your time thinking about retail, shopping. When you go shopping yourself, what's a favorite shopping spot for you? I don't know, maybe when you're traveling or maybe around your home, around Amsterdam.
Well, I think if I'm traveling, I always like to. I always make an effort to visit sort of the prime locations, at least the top locations in the European cities, which to me, it's very useful, but also it's very enjoyable. I think if I'm in the Netherlands, of course, I love to go to, of course, the city center area. The Ninth Street is a popular area to stroll about. But also, of course, I try to make an effort to go, for example, to Antwerp, which is very easily accessible, and also to go to London. I have lived and worked for London for a long time. And of course, you get to use to sort of the broad offer, the retail offer that's present. So I try to, not to be too dependent on one location and try to visit different locations. But I think what really helps if there is a mixture of different retail brands, and of course, if there's also an interesting F&B offer with new restaurants, it always helps to make it a bit more appealing to go there.
I am really excited about the Battersea Power Station in London. I can't wait to visit it. It looks so cool. Have you had a chance to visit that yet yourself?
I haven't, unfortunately, yet. I have been in various European cities lately, but London is one of the cities where I haven't been in the last couple of months. So it's also on top of my list.
Yeah, it looks so cool. I would encourage anybody who's not aware just to Google it. It looks awesome. Such a cool redevelopment project. Well, okay, Chard, here's a weird question apropos of nothing. So last night, first of all, let me back up. Are you familiar with the TV show Loki on the Disney TV show? It's in the Marvel universe. Do you have any idea what I'm talking about? It's fine if you don't.
No,
so my
I
wife and I
don't.
are watching it. And there's a scene where characters are eating in an automat, which for folks who don't know is where you go into a restaurant, you put coins in a slot and you open up a door and take the food out. And my wife was like, do they have automats anymore? And I was like, I think the last one in the US closed in the 90s. And then I was like, but wait a minute. I think I went to an automat in Amsterdam called, and I was trying to remember, it's called Fibo, right? Like there's there's a whole chain of them. Is that like the McDonald's of Amsterdam, the automat chain?
Well, it's I would call it sort of they have a presence across the whole of the Netherlands. But of course, what you need to think about is the wall with, of course, the different doors, and you throw in a coin, maybe €2, and you can pick out something that's typically deep fried. It's very popular in the Netherlands, and if you haven't tried it, I can definitely recommend it. But be assured, it's because it's very popular that the products that are behind that wall are sort of relatively fresh.
I remembered various deep fried, like, I don't know, like croquettes, and things like that, things that could be fried and put in there. And you, now when I was there, this was years ago, so it was coins. I imagine today, can you do it with, I don't know, like a credit card?
Yeah, that's finally sort of starting to filter through a bit more, because a lot more people are paying by card nowadays, and also by mobile phone and some of the other equipment that we have. So if you're a successful retailer and you're trying to appeal to a broad range of people, then of course it does help to have some of those payment options.
All right. Well, one last question for you, Chard. For a visitor, coming to the Netherlands, what might be a restaurant or a cuisine that you'd recommend folks try that they couldn't get, anywhere else?
Oh, where they can't get anywhere else. Well, definitely try Fabo. That's one place to go to. But I think we have a couple of good restaurants and sort of very strong performing chef. But I think one of the cuisines that I can advise you to go to is Indonesian food due to sort of our history with Indonesia. And I think that's one of the sort of best cuisines that you can have. Likewise, Suriname food is highly recommended. So those are two of the cuisine types that you can have, and you can get it pretty much in all the big cities in the Netherlands. So if you're feeling a bit more adventurous and you want to try something different, then I can definitely recommend going to a restaurant that has some of those dishes on offer.
Boy, Suriname cuisine. I don't know anything about that. Now I'm intrigued. When we get off the show, I'm gonna go look that up.
Well, if you're over in Amsterdam again, I'm happy to bring you to a good restaurant.
Excellent. I love it. Well, Chard, we are out of time. Thank you so much for joining me to give me the update on European retail. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
And for folks out there, if you want to check out this show or any past shows, head on over the web to everythingweknow.show. That'll take you to our YouTube channel, where we not only have all of these talk shows, but we do retail street tours in cities. We just posted one from Toronto. We've done them in LA, New York, San Francisco, all over the place. We also do an audio podcast. It's called Where We Buy, and it's on any podcast app you like. Just search for Where We Buy, or we're on the web at wherewebuy.show. You can download all of our retail research reports. Heck, we write research reports on all kinds of commercial real estate topics, and they're all available for download over at jll.com. And if you're a LinkedIn user and you want to make sure you're alerted every time we go live on LinkedIn, be sure to follow JLL Retail. That's your hot spot for all of our LinkedIn lives. So this show is called Everything We Know About Retail. What did I learn about retail today? I learned a lot. You know what? I think that I learned that even though I'm not an expert in European retail, I noticed that a lot of the trends that we're seeing here in North America are also very similar to what's going on in the European retail region. So if you want to learn more about everything we know about retail, you can join us here again on our next show.